1995 Camaro Z28, which looks really ridiculous right now because it's cockeyed and the rear end isn't aligned, and it just looks weird. There's a reason for that. I spent 3.5 hours getting the gas tank out today. And we'll talk, and I will talk a little bit about that. But I want to show you a couple of things about the car because there are things about this car that are different than a lot of the cars that we touch on a regular basis, and it's kind of interesting. I also want to talk about some of the differences in manufacturing on more modern cars and where the weaknesses are. Because we look at this and we go, you know, in my world, I look at that and I think that's a new car. It's a 1995, right? It's 28 years old. It's a new car. 20 frickin', and there's Christopher Buttoff, the man with the GTI. Yes.
Ooh.
Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations.
It's the third new car in a year. Huh?
So,
third new car in a year.
Wow.
I was going to say in a month.
Come on over here. I don't want you to stand underneath this aberration because it's not stable. That's how high I had to get. I started out lower and I raised it a little bit, then I raised it a little bit more, then I raised it, and there it is. Okay? So this, in GM parlance, is an F-body. That's the Camaro and Firebird. Now, we've talked about suspensions a little bit, and this is actually something very similar to what is on Bobby's car.
What's going on my car?
It is on your car right now. It's a 3-link suspension.
Yes.
And why is it called a 3-link suspension? These are lower control arms right here. These are lower control arms. And then this is actually like a torque arm. It's a little bit different than Bobby's. You'll notice it's bolted directly to the differential carrier, and it's also bolted to the transmission. And what that does is that prevents this axle from wrapping up this way under hard acceleration. People that buy Camaros tend to like to go a little faster, and this stabilizes the rear end so that it doesn't have wheel hop. Now there's another stabilizer bar in this mix, and that's this over here underneath us. Heat shields. And these bars right here are this is actually a panhard rod. And panhard rods were invented by Panhard. That's why they call them panhard rods. And this rod goes from here to here. So this, when it's in position, here we go, this locates the rear end from side to side. So that the car, and if you've driven a leaf spring car that's a little bit loose in the rear end, they can be really squirrely because the rear end can move from side to side. This limits its travel. There's a type of linkage that's better than a panhard rod. This does a good job of locating the rear end, but there is some side to side movement as the car goes up and down. Minor, but it's there. To take it one step further, you mount a bell crank right here, and you run bars from this side and from this side, and that's known as a Watts link, and that locates the rear end very positively throughout the scope of the suspension travel. So this is a coil suspension, in fact. Control arms, 3 links, lower control, torque arm, coil springs. Those go on these spring perches here, and then there's receiving ends up top side there. Now, if you'll notice, the bottom of this car is super clean, right? I mean, it's super, super clean. But there's also something else that's unique about it, and that is that it's gray, right? You look at an older car, back in the day, when we painted cars, we painted the body. We didn't paint the underside. We left it bare metal. It was not painted. And of course, cars rusted away like crazy. You know, they would literally fall in half after about 4 or 5 years. And most all cars were off the road 25 years later because they literally fell apart. After there was a class action lawsuit against Chrysler about the Aspen and the Volare because they were built the old way. They were just painted on the outside, bare metal on the inside, and the way they were built, on the tops of the fenders, they would get grapefruit-sized holes in 18 months. One winter in the Rust Belt would destroy the fenders on the car. 18 months. Can you imagine buying a new car and having grapefruit-sized holes? So what the automotive industry did, and everybody does it now, is these bodies, when they are they go for the body shop where they're welded together. And if you look closely here, this is a really nice car to show this on. All these little dimples that you see here, those are spot welds. There's a big long pincer that's on a robot. It used to be a guy. It's the transformer, the controls, and the welder were in this pack, like a machine gun with these 2 pincers, and it was counterweighted, and he would swing it in and they'd pull the trigger and he would make these welds.
I have one in my shop if you want to play with it.
Yeah, they're really cool, but a car like this has approximately 4,000 spot welds. This is a unit body car, by the way, meaning that the body and the frame are a single unit. This right here, this is a subframe. This is part of the rear subframe assembly right here. And then this here is the front subframe assembly, the section right here. And when a car this is a pretty high performance car, they're actually very high for 1995, kind of high now. But nowadays, when we get into stratospheric horsepower, we take and connect or tie these 2 subframes together to make the car stiffer. But there's no frame here. The body has all these nice little bends and twists in it. Twists, all right, but it's got bends in it that lend stiffness to the metal after it's been welded together. Now, these welds can fatigue and break. In my misspent youth, I would drive cars so hard I would break these welds. But anyway, what they did after the car is the pieces are put together and they're welded by robots, and you get all these little spot welds. Everybody can see the spot welds, right? Okay. Now, after this car is painted, it's on a rack, by the way. There's a special rack that they make, and I want to show you something because it's visible here. There's a series of holes around this car. You see this little hole right here? This one. And then over here, I've got one here. And I've got one here. And I have one. Yeah, that one. No, that's not one. It's probably up front further. But anyway, they're perfectly round holes, and they're flanged, and they roll up inside. They roll upwards. They have this rack that they place the body on after it's been welded, and then it goes into the body shop. And from there, the very first thing it does is it goes into this ginormous swimming pool, which is the phosphate dip. The car goes into this wash tank and goes through what they call phosphate dip. And this tank is, it's about 20 feet wide and at least 100 feet long in every body shop, in every plant, everywhere in the world. Because everybody does this now. Goes through the phosphate, then it makes a 180-degree turn on a U-turn, or it makes a U-turn, and then it goes through the next tank, which is the electrical deposition primer, or ELPO for short. And this gray color is ELPO. Now what they do is they, what you want to call it, by dipping it in the tank, you get primer everywhere. It goes everywhere in the car, and it effectively seals the entire what is known as body in white, which is the body welded together, nothing bolted to it. It's called a body in white. So it goes through these two dips. LPO is electrically depositioned. They have a positive and a negative charge, and the paint, is bonded to the car. This vintage vehicle would be the kind of the beginning of double-sided galvanized steel. So the lower portions of the car, there's double-sided galvanized steel. Then there's the phosphoric acid dip. It's actually an acid dip. It's etched so that this stuff sticks better. So that paint is really on there. You don't scrape off LPO. It's part of the car. What was I going to say along those lines? Now, in the early 80s, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but the Mustang GTs, a percentage of them, about 15% roughly, the hoods would rust out in a couple of years, and they would rust out up front. Well, what they were doing is they were taking the hoods and running them through the phosphate and the LPO, and then at the end of a shift on the weekend, the part would just sit there after it's gone through the acid dip, and that acid would penetrate deep into the crevices on the front of the hood and rot it out. The solution was to take the hoods off at the end of a weekend shift on a Friday and set them aside with that knot, without them hanging in that position so that the acid would penetrate that, and that's cured the problem. So this is what you see up there. That's 28-year-old phosphate and LPO metal, and look how clean it is. So the reason that the bodies tend to last a little longer now is directly because of this. Now, I pointed out these little things here because these are locating pins for the rack. They drop the body on this rack, and they're tapered pins, and that allows the LPO to penetrate everywhere but this little tiny circle here. Now, and then the car stays on that rack and it gets painted. And then the rack comes around and they put another body on it and it gets painted another color. They keep doing that time and time and time again, and eventually the racks are covered with thick glops of paint that they have to chisel and scrape and beat off this rack. And it turns out, and I have seen hundreds of pounds of this material just laying around the plant because it's waste material. Because the frame might be this big, but the glop might be this big, right? And when it gets too big to handle, that's when they knock it off. Well, that has a different name. If you look it up on eBay, it's called Fordite. Fordite is the leavings of these paint shop racks. It's knocked off, cleaned and polished, and turned into jewelry. Now today's cars are either white, silver, or black, so Fordite from this era is not that interesting. The valuable Fordite is stuff from the 70s when we had yellows and reds and greens and blues. We had colors all over the place. But
Dad used to bring me some home every now and then to polish.
yes,
And sand
where did
around.
he work?
Fremont.
So he was at Fremont Assembly.
Yep.
Yep.
And Oakland before Fremont.
Oh, wow.
He's old.
Very cool. Yeah, because that was the NUMMI plant, and now it's the Tesla plant.
Right.
But anyway, and is it Oakland? Shit, I forget now. I'm trying to remember which plant is now a mall, and of course now it's not
The
that.
Ford one down
Yes.
in LA.
Well, that one and one up there too.
Oh,
San Jose. San Jose. That's what I was looking for. So these cars are not designed to be serviced anymore. They're not. And so the gas tank is over here. We're going to go look at that in a minute. The complaint on this car was the client could smell gas. The client being Bruce Jung. Beautiful car, low miles. He says, man, I go in my garage and it smells like gas all the time. Well, we did some repairs to the evaporative canister, which is back here on this car. It's right there. It's a crazy place for a canister, but that's where it is based on packaging on the Camaro. And it works. but he could smell gas. So we fixed it. He said it was better, but I could still smell it, so we pulled this out. This right here is the bracket for the panhard rod, and the tank has a really long filler neck on it that goes up in here. And to get the tank out, you have to disconnect the straps, drop the tank. It doesn't drop straight down, it stops because of that long filler neck. And then this is in the way. So that's why this car is jacked way the hell up, because I had to clear everything to get the gas tank out. So the suspension's been disconnected, the exhaust has been disconnected, and then I was able to get the tank out. It was quite a battle. All right, let's go look over here. Oh, I want to show you one other thing.
Oh.
All right. The few jobs that are manual on the line, like installing the gas tank, it goes up in there, and then there's a fixture that holds the tank in place, and then there's a driver. I'm going to pass this around, but I need this bolt back. This is a very specific bolt. The reason this bolt is specific is that it has a pilot on it right here. If you look, you can see there's a section where there's no threads. It also has a shoulder. This is designed to be loaded into a bolt driver, which is set at a specific torque. You should see some of these nut drivers and bolt drivers they use. They'll have 15 different, they'll do a bunch simultaneously. Here it's just one at a time. It goes up and they do their thing. But this shoulder and this pilot are there. This allows the bolt to find the hole easier, and that's that speed nut that goes up in there. Here. And then that allows to find it, and then here. Because it's a shoulder bolt, it doesn't need a washer to distribute the load. So they make it easy to assemble the car and reduce the number of parts in one fell swoop. And this is why you don't go to Lowe's or Home Depot to buy bolts.
No.
You don't. This is also, I think that's a grade 9.8 or a 10.9 or something like that. Oh yeah, it's a 9.8. So this is a high grade bolt with a higher tensile strength than the butter bolts that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. When I'm working here, I usually get grade 8 bolts are my standard for metric work. And this is a metric bolt, it's 15 millimeter head. Any questions on that? Anything you want to know? Is it interesting?
Very.
Thank you. Pretty cool, huh? I love these bolts.
Can you get old cars dipped like this if you were doing full rotisserie restoration? Can you get it dipped in the?
It is possible to do some. I don't know if anybody does phosphate or Elpo, but I do know, and this is very popular in England, is they'll do a hot dip galvanized process on a body in England because the tin worm is very active there. Not so active here in California. I mean, this is what a car looks like in Michigan 6 months after it comes off the line. That's what it looks like. You know, it's gone through a couple of rainstorms, it's got some dirt, and it might even have a little bit of surface rust after 6 months. This is normal. Here, this is a I can't believe it's 28 years old. It's insane. This is an aftermarket exhaust. This is a MagnaFlow. That's the only thing on the car that I've seen that's not stock. Let's go over and take a look at the gas tank.